The obstacles you experience in intimacy in your relationship is God's way of calling you to step in and grow up a little more in yourself and in your relationship with your spouse. Think of it as an invitation to learn how to take more personal responsibility, to learn to speak up, to learn to be more humble, to be more honest, to be more patient, to be more kind, to be more compassionate, and to cherish your spouse more deeply than ever. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. Welcome to this episode of the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I want to extend a special warm welcome, especially if you're new here. I'm your host, Dan Purcell. I'm on a mission to help couples improve intimacy in their relationships. Through over 20 years of my own marriage and also counseling hundreds of couples privately through my coaching program, I know that sex in marriage is something we all struggle with at times, yet it's not something that we talk a lot about in constructive ways. My goal with this podcast is to give you the tools, ideas, insights, tips, and conversation starters you need in your marriage to take sex and intimacy to the next level. I'm a Christian in my personal beliefs. In my view, I see God's perfect plan all over sex. I personally think God loves sex, desires individuals to embrace their sexuality, delights in couples finding joy in their sexual relationship, and desires every couple to master the skills needed to build a truly intimate union. Yet, if sex is supposed to be so good, why is there so much frustration about it? Why did God create your spouse to be so different from you? Why is it hard to get on the same page sexually sometimes? Why doesn't desire come naturally, especially after being married for a while? Do you also find the irony in how sexual desire created your children in the first place, but now that you have children, it tends to sabotage your sexual desire? What about the dichotomy of one person wanting to connect emotionally before connecting physically, while the other person wants to connect physically before connecting emotionally? Today is a Q&A episode, which I'll get to in just a moment. I'm receiving a lot of anonymous questions lately, about once a day now, and I am humbled that you trust me with your most urgent and private questions. We'll address a handful of these questions today, and I'll plan another Q&A episode in a few weeks. Sometimes I'll combine a few related questions together to address things more efficiently. If you'd like to send me your question anonymously, you can do so by going to getyourmarriageon.com, click on resources, and then anonymous questions. Earlier this year, this podcast hit 1 million downloads. Can you believe it? That's amazing. Thank you for downloading and sharing this podcast with your married friends and for leaving reviews. I recently received this review. This person said, "This podcast is a hidden gem. It is super practical, humorous, and so insightful. Their openness and positivity surrounding sexuality in the context of marriage and spiritual circles is a much-needed conversation. I was skeptical at first, but we are growing as a couple thanks to this podcast." Thank you for that review. So we have a tradition on this podcast. I read a review, and if you hear your review read, email support@getyourmarriageon.com, and I'll personally mail you a gift as a way of saying thanks for doing an important part of sharing this podcast with others so that they too can get their marriage on and benefit from it. As I address these questions today, I hope you see a common thread in everything I share. It's my belief that really good sex and intimacy doesn't come easily because everything of value in life takes consistent effort. Building an intimate marriage isn't supposed to be an overnight task. I want to invite you to think of it in this way. The obstacles you experience in intimacy in your relationship is God's way of calling you to step in and grow up a little more in yourself and in your relationship with your spouse. Think of it as an invitation to learn how to take more personal responsibility, to learn to speak up, to learn to be more humble, to be more honest, to be more patient, to be more kind, to be more compassionate, and to cherish your spouse more deeply than ever. It's my belief that sexual development follows spiritual development. Building a rewarding, intimate marriage is indeed spiritual work. Most of the advice about sex you see in magazines, in the grocery store checkout line, or in movies, or even in traditional sex therapy in the United States focuses on sex being primarily a function of genitals, orgasms, hormones, technique, prescribed dialogues, and positions. Did you know that the outcomes of couples going to traditional sex therapy are pretty poor? One study shows that 2 years after a couple goes to traditional sex therapy, the vast majority of couples are back to their old patterns and struggles. I believe that type of therapy failed the couples because it didn't address the underlying relationship dynamic. And then there's the picture that porn paints. It's that the ideal is to always want more intensity, never say no, always be ready, always be in the mood, eager, and always turned on, ready to go with creative and wild expressions of sex being the norm. And because we don't talk about sex in healthy ways in our culture, we assume that others are having this kind of sex while we have our own set of struggles. And if there's anything broken or wrong, then it must be us, because everyone else must be having great sex and not us. Although I think there is some truth in what I mentioned just now, it misses the mark because I believe human sexuality has its root in an intimate relationship. You can't separate the sex from yourself and the person you're having it with. My philosophy of sex coaching is that the far majority of sexual problems in a relationship are not about hormones or lack of technique or sex positions, but are actually intimacy problems. I believe when you as a couple address and confront your challenges to intimacy, the various sexual issues tend to resolve effectively. This includes learning how to grow and develop your own thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes that are conducive to a positive sexual and intimate mindset. I also believe sex is very core to who we are as an individual. Sex is oh so very personal. As a marriage coach, I solve sexual issues in the marriage first, with lots of compassion, by the way. These are delicate and real feelings. But if a couple can get the courage to address and work through their sexual difficulties first, everything else in their marriage becomes a lot easier. Whether it be finances, parenting, in-laws, faith matters, or what direction the toilet paper roll should be loaded on the dispenser. I'm very grateful you're here today. Are you ready? Let's dive into these wonderful questions. Question 1. I am a newlywed and my husband and I were older virgins when we were married in January, so just a few months ago. We had a rocky start with intimacy. We quickly found out it's definitely not like the movies. I am noticing that I often feel incomplete after sex with my husband. Still, even though I do love our time with each other, I am finding that I feel fulfilled only when I orgasm, and that is usually when he manually stimulates me. I brought up my concerns and feelings of unfulfillment when I do not orgasm or finish, and I asked him if he enjoys touching me, or if it feels like a chore for him to do. He says that it's work to help me orgasm because it takes me about 15 to 20 minutes to climax. And he says that he enjoys that I am enjoying him stimulating me, and he does not feel like it's a chore for him. But I won't lie. It did hurt my feelings when he said that it's work to help me orgasm because it makes me feel like my sexual experience with him is not as important. He asked me if I would do that for him if he needed it, and I genuinely said I would. In summary, how can I help my husband enjoy himself more when he is stimulating me and helping me orgasm before or after intercourse? Thank you for your help. First of all, I want to say that this issue is not unique to you. Many wives write in wishing their husbands would spend more time on them during sex and not making it feel like a chore and obligation in the process. There are a few approaches we can take here, so let me offer 3 ideas. First, it's actually very normal for women to take 15 to 20 minutes of stimulation in order to climax, sometimes even more time. I believe there's divine design behind this. One theory as to why I believe it takes women longer to climax than men is that for women in general are so busy taking care of other people every day. This is one area where Mother Nature has invited her to just lie back and be pampered for once, and it shouldn't be short. This taking 20 minutes or more is a gift. Second is to take a close look at the story you're telling yourself in this situation and see if there's another way you can look at it that is more believable to you. So from what you wrote, I'm gathering that the story you're telling yourself is, I'm a chore, I'm a burden, and he's bored. If I just wouldn't take so long to get there, I'd be more fulfilled. You're probably bracing yourself for disappointment before the next sexual encounter. What are some alternative ways to think about this that are believable to you? What are some new narratives or stories you can give yourself? I'm going to give you a few suggestions, but this is something I encourage you to seriously look at and to take action by writing out a few alternative stories, rather than just taking my suggestions at face value. Here are my suggestions. It does take work to bring me to orgasm, but I'm worth it. My husband must be getting tired, but he's still hanging in there. He must love me enough to do this for me. There's nothing wrong with me for taking 15 to 20 minutes to climax. I'm normal, and this is an opportunity for my husband to learn what it means to pamper his sexy wife. Here's the fourth idea. My sexual experience matters. It matters that we have good experiences so that we'll want to keep growing in this way. I think it's good judgment for me to advocate for shared mutual pleasure in our sexual relationship, so I'll keep asking for what I want. Ultimately, the story you choose to tell yourself over and over becomes the basis of your belief, and it will have a big outcome as to how you approach this issue together as an intimate team in your marriage. Right. My third suggestion in this situation is let's talk practical here. Sometimes adjusting your typical script so that you go first and then your husband goes second can really help a lot. Also, give yourself permission to take an active role in your own sexual pleasure during sex. For example, could you spell your husband and take a turn with your own hand if his hand gets tired? Or what if you both got in a position where you put some lubricant on the tip of his penis, take his penis in your hand, and use the tip of his penis like a paintbrush against your own vulva? What about giving his tongue a turn if his hand is tired? What about making it a sexy game? There's also the option of using a vibrator once in a while too, if you like. Sometimes engaging in sexually arousing conversation while he caresses you can make the 15 to 20 minutes be a more joyous time. One husband once told me that his wife expressed disappointment that she took so long to come. He responded that he wasn't disappointed at all, and he doesn't want to be denied the pleasure of touching her for any shorter length of time. He relished in the time it took to bring her to orgasm. You can make these times really sweet and intimate as you bask in each other's sexy presence. Okay, the second question. My husband struggles with achieving orgasm with me, except if he stimulates himself. He is 55 and we have been married 30 years. He says it's due to aging and I want to be intimate with him, but I'm afraid that we will no longer be able to have intercourse. How can we still continue to be intimate, and how do I expand my definition of sex? I really appreciate this question. There's a lot I don't know about you or your husband, so I'm going to make some assumptions here with your question. I'm assuming that he once was able to achieve orgasm without self-stimulation rather easily, but now that he's aged, it's become more difficult for him, so that he wants to self-stimulate to help him get there. I'm also assuming that you get a lot of pleasure from being the one that brings him to orgasm with your body. It is true that as men age, they can expect their penises to cooperate less and less. For some men, it can be very embarrassing and disheartening to see the decline in their sexual functioning in this way. Did you know some marriages go sexless because he is embarrassed about his ability to perform, so he starts avoiding sexual encounters? Yet, on the other hand, there are many couples in their 70s, 80s, and 90s that report having a very active and fulfilling sex life. The way they had sex may be different from when they were younger, but it's still a very sexual experience for both people nonetheless. Your greater question is how to expand your definition of sex. Here's a thought I have for you. When you have sex, is it done with the lights on, with your eyes open, gazing into each other's countenances? Is sex for you about two people sharing something special? What are you communicating non-verbally through the powerful language of sex? Here's the third question I want to address today. My husband and I are both on a faith deconstruction journey. With it has come some changes in what we each believe. He has expressed that he wishes he would have had other sexual partners and have had more sexual experiences prior to our marriage. We were both abstinent before marriage and married young. We've been married for nearly 2 decades, and I cannot change the past. We have a great marriage, are very open and intimate, but it really hurts to process what he told me. He assured me that it's not because I'm inadequate, but how could I not feel that way now? and there's no way for me to resolve this feeling for him because I am not open to swinging. I've always known that he still finds other women attractive, and that's just part of life. But some days, it just eats me up inside now. I don't know how to mentally get over this hurdle of feeling like he wants someone else and that he would feel more settled and satisfied if his past were different. What are some healthy ways to deal with this? I really appreciate your question, and I wish you and I were sitting next to each other, having this conversation face to face, so that I can ask questions and get a really better understanding. But I'll just do my best here from what you wrote. Sometimes, when someone we love tells us something that hurts, they're uncovering something true that we've been hiding. What I'm suggesting here is perhaps the reason why the thought of your husband might have wished for different sexual experiences is because he thinks you've been inadequate. And it hurts because there's a part of you that agrees with him, that perhaps you've wondered if you were inadequate for him as well. If you fully believe that you weren't inadequate, then his comment wouldn't stick like it has. This is just a theory I have, and if you were my coaching client, I would help you with great compassion explore this further with you to help you process this. Even if you were open to swinging, which I do not advocate, by the way, it wouldn't solve the problem of adequacy within you because he would find other partners and you'd always be wondering if you were still his number one, if you were still his favorite. It just wouldn't solve the question that you have of your own inadequacy. So that's one angle I highly recommend that you dive a little bit deeper in on yourself. If you and I are sitting face to face having this conversation, another angle that we could take is to explore the idea of whether or not you feel fully chosen in your marriage. The sad reality in most marriages is that one person chose the other, and the other person agreed to be married, but didn't full-heartedly choose the other person back, if that makes sense. If you were to do your life over again, perhaps you'd choose your husband again. But this new revelation has you questioning if he would have chosen you, given what he now knows. Choosing someone wholeheartedly is risky and takes courage. It means a lot to choose another just flawed human being with their own limitations and things that drive you wild, right? If you think this might be closer to the heart of the matter, I recommend processing this with him. One more note. As we develop as adults, we go through phases of construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. This is a normal adult development. A friend said that this pattern tends to go in decades, with construction phase in our early young adult years of our 20s, and then deconstruction in our 30s and early 40s as we conclude this first half of our life. Then, as we begin the second half of our life, we start the reconstruction phase, where we want to build something better heading into our 40s and 50s as we begin that second half life journey. This is because things that served us in our younger years no longer serve us in our new stages of life. I say all this to reassure you that things like this coming up for your husband and you are to be expected, and it's nothing to be afraid of. Expressing that he wishes he had a more varied sexual history is one thing, but what he chooses to do with that revelation is something else. What will he choose going forward? What will you choose? How will you respond? Ultimately, this is an invitation for you to dig deeper and have a better understanding of yourself and what you believe and what will serve you better in your most important relationship and can be a stepping stone to help you construct something even better in your marriage. I highly recommend marriage coaching in this situation. There's so much good that can be accomplished as you have a guide to help you process feelings, ideas, and make sense of the whole reconstruction process. A good marriage coach should challenge you to take action and push you to grow in areas that will serve you better in your future. This is a good time, I guess, to plug my Get Your Marriage On program, right? Because it's really designed to help and support people like you in this very process you're going through. You can check out those details on my website at getyourmarriageon.com. All right, the fourth question. I'm currently pregnant in my second trimester. Congratulations. Doctor's orders are no intercourse till baby comes. My partner and I currently see each other on the weekends, but he is finding the no intercourse and the distance a bit tricky. We will be back together full-time in the middle of next month. Any tips or advice on how we can manage this period? This is a really challenging time, isn't it? Especially with intercourse off the table and the distance between you. I think your baby is your highest priority right now, so it's good to follow the doctor's orders. There isn't going to be a great answer here because you can't not have sex and have sex at the same time, right? This will be something you and your husband will need to work out and realize sometimes in life, there's not going to be an elegant solution to all of these types of problems. Sometimes you choose the least crappy choice among your crappy options. Whatever you choose, I recommend you approach these conversations with compassion and open-hearted understanding. I also recommend that you make a plan for getting intercourse back on track after the baby arrives. Like open your calendar and set a date. We're going to have great intercourse starting this day. Because if you don't plan for getting it back on track, this no sex pattern that you have now will become the new normal. And a few years might go by and you'll realize, hey, we're in a sexless marriage and you've built up tremendous resentment towards each other. You want to avoid that. I do want to leave you with a few practical tips that I know other couples have done during this time. They make time for talking, laughing, and playing together. It might look like watching a show you both like, or playing card games on the bed. It might be having a relaxing bath together. It might involve masturbation to relieve sexual tension in a constructive way that moves your marriage forward, not backwards. Sometimes masturbation can be good medicine when it's handled correctly, no pun intended. What about massages? What about looking into each other's eyes? What about him brushing and blow drying your hair? There are so many great ways to connect if you push yourself to think creatively here. And by the way, congratulations on your soon-to-arrive baby. Children are awesome. I hope you too can look back to this season of your marriage and realize it's a time when you've learned to dig a little deeper in your commitment towards each other. Before we address the last question today, and if you like this episode, you'll definitely like our upcoming virtual retreat that's all about improving sex in your marriage this July. For this retreat, you and your spouse get a hotel room, Airbnb, or send the kids to grandma's for 2 nights. You'll get to join me and my wife live Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday night in 3 sessions. We'll give you specific fun and sexy homework to try. The goal of this sex intimacy retreat is for you two to explore sexuality in your marriage at a deeper level than you ever have. You'll walk away with new techniques, confidence, and learn new things about each other in a more intimate level. And again, the dates are July 12 through 13, and those details can be found on our website, getyourmarriageon.com. And also, let's not forget our next in-person retreat in sunny St. George, Utah this October. Here's what one past participant said about the retreat. The marriage and intimacy retreat was life-changing for us. After 20 years of marriage, we wanted to take our marriage from good to great. During the weekend, we gained so many incredible insights on how we were trying to fix each other rather than ourselves, making assumptions and putting expectations on each other that were false due to a lack of honest communication that had been shaped over the past decades of routine. We gained so many tools for improving connection and communication, but also changing our own attitudes about ourselves and our intimate life. What an incredible kickstart to the next phase of our marriage, and we can't wait. These retreats are fun, romantic, and deep and instructive. We combine instruction and coaching into a powerful weekend. Your marriage deserves your very best investment of your time, talents, and energy. So come vacation with us. And it's limited to just 20 couples, so act now. All right, here's the last question for the day. My wife struggles touching my penis or even looking at my penis. She says it makes her uncomfortable. However, she is willing to because she loves me, but it really makes her uncomfortable. How can I help her become more comfortable? What advice do you have in helping women overcome the uncomfortableness with their husband's penis or genital area? Thank you for your honest question, and I feel for you. This is common, and sometimes it goes the other direction. The husband struggles to touch or look at or get near his wife's vulva. Please understand, first and foremost, that this is a problem your wife needs to solve. You can't fix it for her. You can't solve it for her. Any attempt to try to fix her will be an attempt at control, which is antithetical to intimacy. If your wife is truly interested in changing this aspect of herself, there are some steps she can take. For example, think about a food that you may have not liked as a child, but now as an adult, you can like it. For me, it's tomatoes. I think I learned to like tomatoes by eating more of them and just growing up around the idea of tomatoes. Frequent exposure to tomatoes, which means maybe eating a little bit more each time, helps me get to the point where I can enjoy tomatoes in my salad or hamburger. I even grow tomatoes in my garden, and those are so different than what you get at the grocery store. All of this is to say that she must want to like touching your penis. If she doesn't want to, you only have 4 options. Option number 1, get upset at her, hoping that she'll feel bad enough to cave and touch your penis to make you happy with her again. Idea number 2, give up on any desire to have her like your penis more than she does. This is like folding into her to keep the peace and probably going to harbor some resentment towards her while doing it. Option 3, withdraw emotionally from the relationship. If the idea of her not wanting to touch your penis hurts you, no longer put yourself in situations where you might get hurt. Then you might find yourself disinvesting in the relationship. So far, those 3 options might sound a little sarcastic, but those are we either pressure, yield, or withdraw when confronted with things we don't like in our relationships, fundamentally. But there is a 4th option, and it's this. Realize how this situation in your marriage is inviting you to grow up in some aspect of yourself or in your marriage. Is it that you tend not to voice your concerns and play small in your relationship? Or is it that you tend to go along to keep the peace and not advocate for what you believe would be good in your marriage? Or are your desires valid in the first place? Are you being needy or babyish about it? I don't know the answer here, but there are just some thoughts for you to consider, and you can judge here. And of those 4 options, the 4th one is the only real option. It may not be an ideal outcome, but it is a path for growth. I believe sexual issues are invitations for personal growth. It will require you to grow in some aspect of yourself, and in turn, you'll be inviting your wife to grow as a result. But you'll make far more progress by focusing on yourself first here rather than trying to fix her. Also, keep in mind that she might purposely not want to like touching your penis because the fact that she's not willing to like touching your penis gives her the upper hand in the power struggle in your marriage by being the one hedging and holding back in the relationship. I'm not saying this might be the reality in your marriage, but it is possible. I see it happen in many marriages. We always assume our spouses have the very best intentions, but my experience is that sometimes people take pleasure in doing hurtful things to their spouse while appearing innocent. This is what experts call normal marital sadism. In other words, an unwillingness to push and grow oneself and to extend oneself for the other person is sometimes selfish, and they are fine staying in that state. So I don't know what it's like in your relationship because I only have this question in text form, but these are just ideas for you to consider and look at it from all angles to determine what's right for you. In summary, action is sexy, not just talk. I hope you too can have conversations and take action about this and make some meaningful traction here. Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, please check out getyourmarriageon.com for more resources on how to grow your marriage, make sex super fun, and spice things up without the yuck. Also, check out our signature coaching program for couples. It's the Get Your Marriage On program. Now go get your marriage on.